So this is Let's Talk Data, the Maputo Protocol edition. We're talking with Nebila Abdulmelik. And we've been talking about the journey of Maputo and some of the issues that it had to overcome and some of the issues that it addressed in its early days, continues to address, of course. But the question that I now have is, for those working on moving this agenda even further, what kind of information, data, or statistics do you feel they would mostly benefit from, especially if they could find it way easier than they do now?
So I think more recently we have a lot of data in terms of women in politics, particularly when it comes to women in parliament, and obviously at heads of state level, but that's so minimal that
it's so easy to count.
Yeah, unfortunately. What we don't have data on is women in local governance and women that are engaging in the political space, but not necessarily in parliament. So I think that would be useful.
And so like women in political party leadership?
Exactly. Women in political party leadership, women in local governance, women who are participating in areas that are outside of the realm of parliament. I think that would be really interesting and useful, because sometimes I think we neglect those areas, even though they're fundamental to women's political leadership, representation, participation more generally, more broadly. Other areas where I feel data is lacking is data on widows, data on women in distress, and also issues around land ownership, land inheritance, which is quite contentious, and one of the reasons why countries like Burundi had refused to ratify the Maputo Protocol around issues of land. So I think it would be really useful to get more data around those issues.
In your experience, have we, whatever data has been available for women's rights organizations and organizations working with data, how have we used this? In ways that help to propel the agenda forward? Is there how are we making use of this data? Is it helping us move forward?
I think when it comes to women in political participation, it has allowed us to kind of push the agenda forward. I think we need to deepen it and also tell the stories behind the data, because sometimes the data can also be overwhelming. If you tell me that 1 million women are living with HIV and AIDS, it seems enormous. But if you start to tell me the stories behind those 1 million women, who are they? Where are they living? What are the commonalities amongst them? What is it that we can do to support them? Are they mothers? Are they single mothers? Are they under 20? Where do they reside? Are they rural? Are they urban? So a little bit more teasing out the data to understand what the data is telling us about the situation and what we can do about it. So I think a little bit of deepening of the data would be useful, but also sometimes going beyond the numbers to hear the stories it would be, I think, more constructive in finding ways in which to address the issues.
The whole issue of data stories has been picking up quite a bit of steam, especially around the open data community. You'll see online quite a bit about impact stories and data stories. And I think that's driven also by the realization that sometimes not everything that can be measured matters. And sometimes not everything that matters can be measured. So you might have a lot of data on a specific issue, and the issue presumably matters, but because the data can dehumanize it so much, it becomes a statistics issue rather than an issue about the rights of women.
The other set of data that I would be interested in getting or making it available is data around unpaid care work, because there are a lot of misconceptions around what that means. When women's rights activists or feminists say unpaid care work needs to be valued, it needs to be reduced, it needs to be redistributed, there's not a common understanding of what that means, and perhaps the burden on women and girls of care work, the care economy, tending to the sick. So I think data around that would also be really interesting, and hopefully would be useful in making people understand the enormous burden that is on women and girls. And if you quantified that, what that would mean to the economies, and how different the ways in which we measure our economies would be if we looked at the care economy, and the things that we don't necessarily monetize or value in that way.
Yeah, and I think we've had a conversation with someone else about that exact thing. But the fact that unpaid care work, by valuing it, allows us, for instance, to add it to our calculation of economic growth, in the sense of the economy, and because it is a distinct contribution to GDP. But probably in the shortest possible way, how do you describe unpaid care work? Because I remember we had big debates even at the UN, where some ambassadors claimed that by including unpaid care work in the Sustainable Development Goals framework, we were trying to create a global system where husbands would now have to pay their wives a salary. And that was an anathema to even bring up. Of course, it turns out that it wasn't true, and that made it into the framework. But how would you describe?
So unpaid care work is often all of the work that is done, usually in the home, that is not paid. So when women rear their children, when they tend to them when they're sick, when they go to fetch water, when they're doing domestic duties, washing clothes, cleaning the house, all of that stuff, unless it's outsourced, unless you have a help that comes in who you pay, is usually unpaid care work.
Working on the farm.
Exactly. All of those things. And so what I think the push around unpaid care work is, one, when you value it, you understand the tremendous value that it brings in building a society, building a family, building a community, to the economy at large of the nation. But also, when you say redistribute, it means, one, redistribute the burden between men and women, between the state and society. So when a state, for example, sets up daycare facilities for mothers, working mothers, that's part of
redistribution.
Exactly, and also relieving the burden on women. When we have time-saving technologies, for example, that allow women, or actually even men, to do domestic duties more quickly. When you have running taps, when you have a well in your neighborhood, so that you reduce the amount of time that you're spending going to fetch water or firewood, things like that. I think that's what is meant by really valuing, redistributing, reducing, and also caring for the elderly and caring for the sick. So when the state puts or creates or subsidizes care for the elderly, care for the sick, that also relieves burden on the women. When we have good hospital care, when we have social security benefits, those are all things that can help to relieve the burden and allow for women to also put their time and their energy into other productive means, or do what they want with their time.
Yeah. Right, so more data on that would definitely help move that agenda forward.
Yeah.
At least enrich the advocacy and the storytelling.
Definitely, yeah.
Excellent. Right, so when we come back and hear a little bit about Nebila's dreams for the next 15, we'll be back.